Sir, you need to get up. That seat isn't yours." The words cracked through the first-class cabin like a glass breaking. Every head turned. Champagne paused mid-air. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the low hum of the aircraft seemed to hesitate, like the machine itself knew something had just gone wrong. Ethan Cole didn't move. He sat in seat 1A, body relaxed, one hand resting lightly on the armrest, the other holding a worn paperback. The cover was creased, the spine softened from years of use. It didn't belong in a place like this. Neither, apparently, did he. From the aisle, Melissa Grant stood rigid, her smile stretched thin, the practiced calm of a flight attendant beginning to fracture at the edges. She wasn't looking at him the way she looked at other passengers. There was something else in her eyes. Hesitation, calculation, fear. "Sir," she said again, softer this time, leaning in just enough to keep her voice low but not private. "There's been a seating issue. A seating issue." Across the aisle, a man in a navy suit exhaled sharply through his nose, already annoyed. A woman near the window tilted her phone just enough to start recording without being obvious. People knew the pattern. They had seen this before. Someone didn't belong. Ethan closed his book. Not quickly. Not dramatically. Just a quiet, deliberate motion. The kind that made people lean in without realizing it. "I'm in the seat printed on my boarding pass," he said. His voice was low, even. No edge, no apology. Melissa's fingers tightened around the manifest tablet in her hand. She glanced over her shoulder, just for a second. That was when the other voice cut in. "I don't care what his boarding pass says." The tone was sharp, clean, used to being obeyed. Brandon Hayes stepped forward from the galley entrance like he owned the space between the seats. Late 20s, tall but not imposing, expensively dressed, but in a way that tried too hard. Electric blue suit, tailored tight across the shoulders, gold watch catching the overhead light every time he moved his wrist. He didn't look at Ethan at first. He looked at Melissa. "You told me 1A, Brandon said, pulling his sunglasses down just enough to make eye contact. "I always sit in 1A. Melissa swallowed. "Yes, Mr. Hayes, but the cabin is fully booked, and then unbook it." A few people shifted in their seats, not because of the words, because of how easily he said them. Brandon finally turned his head. His eyes landed on Ethan. There was a pause, a brief, silent scan. Hoodie, jeans, sneakers. No visible logos. No signals, no markers that meant anything in a place like this. And just like that, the decision was made. "That seat," Brandon said, pointing casually like he was selecting a drink, "is mine." Ethan looked up at him. Not annoyed, not defensive, just present. "I don't think it is." A small ripple moved through the cabin. Not loud, not obvious, but it was there. The tension tightening, like a wire being pulled slowly between 2 points. Brandon smiled. It wasn't friendly. "Look," he said, stepping closer, lowering his voice just enough to sound controlled, not kind. "I've got a meeting in New York that's worth more than this entire flight. I need the space. I need the privacy. You," he gestured vaguely toward Ethan's clothes, "can sit literally anywhere else." Ethan didn't answer right away. He reached for the glass of sparkling water on the tray beside him, took a slow sip, set it back down with care. The silence stretched. Melissa shifted her weight. "Sir," she said to Ethan, her tone tightening again, "we can offer you an upgraded seat in Economy Plus, extra legroom, and a travel credit." There it was, the pivot, the quiet push. Across the aisle, the man in the navy suit nodded once, as if the solution had finally arrived. Someone behind them whispered, "Just take it," under their breath. Like this was already settled. Ethan turned his head slightly. Not toward Brandon, toward Melissa. "You're asking me to leave a seat I paid for," he said, "so he can sit here." Melissa hesitated. "It's a priority accommodation situation." "That's not a thing," Ethan said. The words landed harder than they sounded. Brandon let out a short laugh. Sharp, dismissive. "Wow," he said, shaking his head. "You really don't get it." He stepped closer now, close enough that the scent of his cologne pushed into the space around Ethan. Heavy, expensive, overpowering. "I'm not asking," Brandon continued. "I'm telling you. That seat is mine." Ethan's eyes didn't move. His breathing didn't change. For a moment, the two men just stood there, separated by inches and everything that wasn't being said. Then Brandon leaned in, low enough that only the front row could hear clearly. "You should probably move," he murmured, "before this turns into something you can't control." A pause, the kind that stretches time. Ethan looked at him. Really looked this time. Not at the suit, not at the watch, not at the posture, at the certainty, at the assumption, at the quiet belief that the world would always bend in his direction. Ethan had seen that look before. In courtrooms, in boardrooms, in men who thought money was the same thing as power. He leaned back slightly in his seat, relaxed. "Then I guess we're about to find out," he said. The air in the cabin shifted, not dramatically, not all at once, but enough. Melissa felt it first, a tightening in her chest she couldn't explain, the sense that the script she thought she understood had just slipped. Brandon straightened. The smile was gone now. In its place, something colder. "Get him out of the seat," he said, louder this time, no longer pretending. Heads turned fully now, no more pretending not to watch. Melissa froze. Her eyes flicked between them. The quiet man in the hoodie, the loud man in the suit. One of them looked like a problem. The other looked like a consequence, and she chose wrong. "Mr. Cole," she said, voice firming up, "I'm going to need you to gather your belongings." The words hung there, heavy, final. Ethan didn't move, not yet. But something inside him shifted, not anger, not fear. Something colder, something precise, like a door closing quietly behind a decision already made. And somewhere beneath the polished calm of the first-class cabin, beneath the leather seats and the soft lighting and the illusion of control, the situation was no longer about a seat. It was about to become something much bigger. Brandon didn't wait for an answer. "Did you hear her?" he snapped, turning slightly toward the watching cabin, letting his voice carry just enough to gather witnesses. "You need to move." A few passengers nodded without thinking, not because they understood the situation, but because the tone felt familiar. Authority, confidence, the kind that usually wins. Ethan remained seated. Still, centered, like the chaos moving around him belonged to someone else. Melissa took a step closer, her posture tightening, rehearsed professionalism hardening into something more rigid. "Sir, if you don't comply, I will have to escalate this." Her voice had changed. Less request. More warning. Across the aisle, the man in the navy suit closed his laptop with a soft click, eyes locked on the scene. A woman 2 rows back angled her phone more openly now, no longer pretending. The quiet murmur of the cabin had turned into something sharper, expectant, hungry. Ethan looked up at Melissa. Not at her uniform, not at her badge. At her face, he saw it clearly now. The pressure, the calculation, the fear of making the wrong call in front of the wrong person. "You already have escalated it," he said. The words were calm, but they landed like a line drawn in the sand. Brandon scoffed. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, rubbing his jaw as if the entire situation was beneath him. "You're holding up an entire flight over a chair." Ethan didn't respond to him. Instead, he reached down slowly and adjusted the sleeve of his hoodie. The motion was small, almost meaningless, but Melissa's eyes followed it. Just for a second, long enough to catch a glimpse of something beneath the fabric. A flash of metal, blue, precise. Then it was gone. "Sir," she said again, sharper now, clinging to protocol like it could anchor her, "I need you to stand up." Silence. Ethan exhaled slowly through his nose. Then he did something unexpected. He unbuckled his seatbelt. The soft click echoed louder than it should have. Brandon smirked immediately, stepping back half a pace, already claiming victory in his mind. "See," he said, glancing around. "Wasn't that hard?" But Ethan didn't stand right away. He leaned forward slightly, placing both hands on the armrests, his head tilted just enough that his voice carried clearly down the aisle. "I'm not moving to another seat," he said. The smirk froze on Brandon's face. "I'm getting off this plane." A ripple of confusion moved through the cabin. Melissa blinked. I don't understand." "You will," Ethan said. He stood up then, and the shift was immediate. Up close, the difference was undeniable. He was taller than Brandon by a full head, broader. Still calm, but no longer passive. There was weight to him now. Presence. Brandon instinctively took a small step back. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough. "Good," Brandon said quickly, recovering, his voice rising again. "Then go. We're done here." Ethan turned. Not toward the exit, toward the overhead compartment. He reached up, pulled down a small, worn leather bag, the kind that didn't match the rest of first class. No branding, no shine. Just use. He slung it over his shoulder. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. The movement was simple, but something about it slowed the room. Melissa felt it first. That same tightening in her chest. That quiet instinct that something had just shifted again, and she didn't understand how. "Sir," she said, her voice unsteady now, "if you're deplaning, I'll need you to." Ethan didn't look at her. He unlocked the phone. The screen lit up. Black background, minimal interface, one icon, a gold scale. Not a brand, not an app anyone in that cabin recognized. Brandon rolled his eyes. "Oh my God," he muttered. "What is this? Some kind of performance?" Ethan raised the phone to his ear, and then, in a voice that no longer belonged to the man they thought they understood, he spoke. "This is Ethan Cole." The tone was different, sharper, controlled, precise. "Verification code Alpha 9, Sierra Cole. Confirm identity." The cabin went completely still. No one spoke. No one moved. Even Brandon didn't interrupt this time. There was a pause. Ethan listened, then nodded once. "Yes," he continued. "I'm on board Asset 772 Bravo. Aero Global Flight 492. Melissa's fingers tightened around her tablet. Asset? He didn't say plane. He said asset. "I'm flagging an immediate breach of operational conduct," Ethan said. "Hostile environment, discriminatory behavior, crew compliance failure." Each word landed heavier than the last. Melissa felt her stomach drop. What is he doing?" she whispered, almost to herself. No one answered. Ethan's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I'm invoking Clause 14, Section B," he said. "Full enforcement." A pause. Longer this time, then "pull insurance authorization." The words hit like a detonation. Brandon blinked. "What?" he said, laughing nervously. "Okay, now this is insane." Ethan didn't react. "Revoke flight clearance," he continued. "Effective immediately." Melissa's breath caught. "No," she said under her breath. "No, that's not." Ethan lowered the phone slightly. Looked at her for the first time since the call began. "You have about 3 minutes," he said quietly, "before the cockpit loses its clearance data." Her face went pale. "That's not possible," Brandon snapped, his voice rising again, desperate now. "You can't just— Who are you even talking to?" Ethan didn't answer him. He brought the phone back to his ear. "Proceed," he said. Then he ended the call. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy, oppressive, like the air itself was waiting. Brandon let out a short, forced laugh. "Nothing's going to happen," he said quickly, looking around, searching for agreement. "This guy's bluffing. He's just trying to scare." The chime cut him off, not the usual soft tone. 3 sharp tones, urgent. Every head turned toward the cockpit. The door opened. Fast. Captain Daniel Brooks stepped out, his face already drained of color, eyes scanning the cabin with a kind of focused panic that didn't belong in first class. He didn't look at Brandon. He didn't look at Melissa. He looked straight at Ethan. And for a brief, terrifying moment, the man in command of the aircraft looked like he had just realized he wasn't in control anymore. "Mr. Cole!" Captain Daniel Brooks' voice came out tighter than he intended, not the voice of a man used to command, the voice of a man trying to confirm a nightmare. He moved down the aisle quickly, one hand brushing the seat backs for balance, the other gripping the edge of his uniform jacket like it might steady something inside him. 4 stripes on his shoulder, decades of experience, thousands of hours in the air. None of it mattered right now. He stopped in front of Ethan, close enough to see the details others had missed, the stillness, the eyes, the absence of reaction. "Tell me you didn't just make that call," Brooks said, lower now, almost under his breath. Ethan held his gaze. "I did." The words dropped clean. "Final." Brooks closed his eyes for half a second. That was all it took. When he opened them again, something had shifted. The calculation was gone, replaced by something colder, more immediate. Damage control. Behind him, Brandon let out an incredulous laugh, louder this time, feeding off his own disbelief. "Are you serious right now?" he said, stepping forward. "Captain, this guy is messing with you. He's bluffing. Just have him removed so we can take off." Brooks didn't look at him. Not even a glance. That was the first crack. Brandon felt it, even if he didn't understand it. "Captain," he pressed, irritation sharpening his tone. "Did you hear me?" Brooks finally spoke. "We're not taking off." The words landed flat, heavy, permanent. A murmur moved through the cabin, low at first, then building. Confusion, annoyance, the beginnings of panic. "What do you mean, not taking off?" someone said from row 2. "I have a connection," another voice snapped. "This is unacceptable." Brandon stepped closer, his face tightening, color rising in his cheeks. "No," he said, shaking his head. "No. That's not how this works. You don't cancel a flight because some guy made a phone call." Brooks turned then, slowly, and for the first time his eyes met Brandon's. "You're right," he said. "A beat. We don't. Another beat. But we just did." Silence. Not the passive quiet from before. This was different. Sharp. Cutting. Like something invisible had snapped in the air. Melissa's hands began to shake. "Captain," she said, her voice thin, barely holding together. "What's happening?" Brooks didn't answer immediately. He looked at Ethan again, as if confirming, one last time, that this was real. Then he spoke. "The flight plan has been pulled from the system," he said. "Navigation clearance is gone. Insurance authorization has been revoked. Each sentence stripped something away. Safety. Legitimacy. Control. This aircraft," he continued, his voice tightening, "is no longer cleared for operation." A woman near the window gasped softly. The man with the navy suit leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes narrowing as the pieces began to fall into place. Brandon blinked. Once. Twice. "No," he said again, but this time it sounded different. Not confident. Not controlled. Uncertain. "You're overreacting," he pushed. "Call whoever you need to call and fix it." Brooks didn't move. "Ground control already denied pushback," he said. The words hit harder than anything before. Because now it wasn't internal. It wasn't theoretical. It was real. Brandon's mouth opened. Closed. He turned, looking around the cabin as if someone else would step in. Agree with him. Restore the script. No one did. Ethan adjusted the strap of his bag on his shoulder. The movement was quiet, almost invisible, but Brooks noticed. "Mr. Cole," he said quickly, stepping closer, lowering his voice again, urgency bleeding through now. "We can resolve this. Whatever happened, we can fix it." Ethan looked at him. Not unkind, but not flexible either. "You had the chance to resolve it," he said. Brooks flinched. Just slightly. Behind them, Brandon's voice broke through again, louder, sharper, desperate now. "This is insane," he snapped. "You're grounding a plane over a seat?" Ethan turned his head. Slowly. And this time, he looked directly at him. "It stopped being about the seat," he said. Brandon swallowed. Something in the way Ethan said it, flat, controlled, absolute, cut through the noise in his head. "What are you even talking about?" Brandon demanded, but there was a crack in it now. Ethan took a step forward, closing the distance. Up close, the difference between them was undeniable. Not just in height, in gravity, in presence. "You made it about something else," Ethan said. "The moment you decided I didn't belong here." Brandon's jaw tightened. "That's not what I said." Ethan didn't blink. "It's exactly what you said." The words hung there, and for a second no one breathed. Melissa looked down at the floor. She had heard it, every word, and she had done nothing. Ethan turned away from Brandon, dismissed him. Just like that. He looked back at Brooks. "I'm deplaning," he said. Brooks nodded immediately. "Too quickly." "Yes," he said. "Of course." Because now he understood. This wasn't about winning. It was about minimizing damage. Ethan stepped into the aisle. The cabin parted without being asked. People shifted, moved their legs, pulled their bags closer. Not out of courtesy, out of instinct. As he passed Melissa, he paused. Just for a second. She looked up at him, her eyes wide, something close to panic sitting just beneath the surface. "I was trying to keep the situation under control," she said, her voice barely audible. Ethan studied her. He saw the fear, the regret, the realization. "You were trying to keep the wrong person happy," he said. The words were quiet, but they landed harder than anything else he had said. She couldn't answer. He moved past her, toward the exit. Behind him, the cabin erupted, voices rising, questions firing, phones coming out in the open now, no longer hidden. "What's going on? Why are we deplaning? This is ridiculous." Brandon stood frozen in the middle of it. His world, which had felt so solid minutes ago, was starting to tilt. He turned to Brooks. "Fix this," he said, but it sounded more like a plea than a command. Brooks didn't respond. He couldn't. Because for the first time since Brandon Hayes had learned to speak, no one in the room was listening to him anymore. And at the front of the cabin, walking toward the open door, Ethan Cole didn't look back once. He didn't need to. He already knew exactly what was about to happen next. The jet bridge felt colder than it should have. Ethan stepped out of the aircraft without slowing down. The shift from the controlled air of the cabin to the harsher terminal corridor, hitting like a change in atmosphere. Behind him, the noise followed. Voices spilling out, rising, colliding, growing louder with every second. Confusion had turned into anger. Anger was turning into panic. He didn't turn around. Didn't need to. He could already hear the rhythm of it. The questions, the accusations, the unraveling. "Sir, you can't just," a gate agent rushed forward, her voice breaking halfway through the sentence as she recognized the look on his face. Not rage, not urgency. Control. Absolute. Ethan stopped in front of the podium, setting his bag down with a quiet, deliberate motion. He pulled his phone back out, thumb already moving across the screen. "Open the jet bridge," he said, without looking up. The agent blinked. It's already open, sir." "Keep it that way." Behind them, the first passengers began to spill out. A wave of expensive suits, irritated faces, raised voices. "What the hell is going on? They said the flight's cancelled." "Cancelled?" "That's impossible." A man in his 60s pushed past the others. his face flushed red, tie loosened, eyes sharp with frustration. "I have a meeting in London tonight," he snapped at the agent. "You people don't just cancel transatlantic flights without explanation." Ethan didn't look at him. He didn't look at anyone. He typed. A message. Short, clean. "Initiate Protocol 7. Breach of lease. JFK Terminal. Prepare statement. Send." The door behind him burst open harder this time. "Brandon!" He came out fast, no longer compassed, no longer controlled, his hair slightly out of place, his collar loosened, his expression raw. "There he is," Brandon said, pointing, his voice loud enough to cut through the noise. "Don't let him leave." Two Port Authority officers were already moving toward the gate, drawn by the disturbance call. Heavy boots, measured pace, faces set in the kind of tired neutrality that comes from years of dealing with people who think they matter more than they do. Brandon stepped toward them immediately. "That's him," he said, breath sharp, words tumbling over each other. "He threatened the crew, interfered with the flight, and assaulted me." The officers slowed. Not stopped, but slowed. That mattered. Ethan finally looked up. Not at Brandon. At the officers. His expression didn't change. "Officer," he said, voice steady. "My name is Ethan Cole." One of the officers, older, broad shoulders, eyes that missed very little, tilted his head slightly. "Go on," he said. Ethan reached into his pocket. Slowly. Deliberately. Every movement visible. He pulled out a slim black card and handed it over. The officer took it, looked at it, then looked again. Something shifted in his posture. Not obvious, but real. "Linda Equity Partners," the officer read under his breath, then glanced up. "Senior Managing Partner?" Ethan nodded once. Brandon scoffed loudly. "Oh, come on," he snapped. He printed a business card. "That doesn't mean anything." The officer didn't respond to him. He kept his eyes on Ethan. "Want to explain what happened on that plane?" he asked. Ethan did. Calmly. Clearly. No embellishment. No hesitation. "There was a dispute over seating," he said. "Mr. Hayes demanded my assigned seat. When I refused, he escalated. Verbal harassment, threats, physical contact. I did not touch you." Brandon shot back immediately, stepping forward. Ethan didn't even look at him. "You grabbed my shoulder when I attempted to exit the aircraft," he continued. The officer's gaze shifted to Brandon. "Did you?" he asked. Brandon hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second. Too long. "I was trying to stop him from leaving," he said quickly. "He was fleeing the scene." "Fleeing?" Ethan repeated, finally turning his head slightly. "I'm standing right here." The second officer, younger, glanced between them, then toward the captain and Melissa, who had just emerged from the jet bridge, both looking like they had aged 10 years in the last 5 minutes. "Captain," the older officer said, nodding toward Brooks, "you want to weigh in?" Brooks stepped forward, removing his hat. His movements slower now, heavier. "There was no assault initiated by Mr. Cole," he said. "I did witness Mr. Hayes make physical contact first." Brandon's face drained. "That's not—" "And the flight?" the officer pressed. Brooks exhaled. The flight was grounded following a contractual enforcement action. The phrasing was careful, but the meaning wasn't. The officer looked back at Ethan. Contractual, he repeated. Ethan held his gaze. My firm holds the lease on that aircraft, he said. Under specific clauses, we reserve the right to suspend operational authorization in the event of discriminatory conduct or breach of agreement. Silence. Not confusion this time. This, understanding. Slow, heavy, unavoidable. The younger officer let out a quiet breath. You're saying, he said, you shut down the flight. Ethan didn't flinch. I secured my property, he replied. Behind them, the gate screens flickered. One by one. The status changed. On time. Delayed. Then cancelled. A groan rolled through the terminal like distant thunder. People turned. Phones came out. The story was already moving. Faster than any of them. Brandon looked at the screen, then back at Ethan. Something cracked. You can't do this, he said. But the words sounded hollow now. You don't get to just ruin everything over this. Ethan stepped closer. Not aggressively, but intentionally. You're right, he said. I don't. A pause. You did. The words landed clean. Final. Brandon's mouth opened. Closed. Nothing came out. His phone buzzed, once, twice, then again. He pulled it out, hands suddenly less steady. Notifications stacked across the screen. Messages, alerts, mentions. He opened one. A video, shot from inside the cabin. The angle was shaky, but the audio was clear. His voice, loud, sharp. You don't belong here. He stared at it, watched himself, heard himself. The room seemed to tilt. Turn it off, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. But it was already too late. Around him, other phones lit up. Same video, different angles, same words, echoing, growing, spreading. Ethan watched him for a moment, then turned away. Done. Officer, he said, addressing the older man again. I'd like to file a formal complaint for assault. The officer nodded. We can do that, he said. We'll need your statement. You'll have it, Ethan replied. Brandon looked up. Desperate now. You're going to regret this, he said, voice shaking. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Ethan paused. Just briefly. Then looked back at him. And for the first time, there was something in his expression. Not anger. Not satisfaction. Something colder. You're right, he said. A beat. You don't. Then he picked up his bag and walked away. The crowd parted again. Not out of courtesy, out of recognition. Something had shifted. And whatever power Brandon Hayes thought he had walked onto that plane with, he wasn't the one holding it anymore. The terminal didn't calm down. It fractured. Voices overlapped, sharp and rising, bouncing off glass and steel. Departure boards flickered red across multiple gates. Agents moved faster, speaking into radios with clipped urgency. A line that had once been orderly dissolved into a restless crowd pressing for answers no one could give. Ethan kept walking. Not fast, not slow. Measured. A black sedan waited beyond the sliding doors, engine idling, driver already out, scanning the flow of people with practiced awareness. He saw Ethan and stepped forward immediately, opening the rear door without a word. 5 minutes, Ethan said, stopping just short of the car. The driver nodded once and stepped back. Ethan didn't get in. He turned slightly, positioning himself where he could still see the entrance to the terminal. He checked his phone. Notifications stacked in clean lines. Internal alerts first. Legal. Operations. Risk. Then the outside world. Mentions. Tags. Messages. The story already pulling oxygen from every corner it touched. A call came through. He answered. Cole. A woman's voice on the other end. Controlled, but tight. It's Claire. We're seeing the video. I know. It's everywhere. News desks are calling. CNBC. Bloomberg. Local stations. Social is spiking. Millions of views in minutes. Ethan watched the doors as they slid open again and again, releasing more passengers into the chaos. Hold statements, he said. One line. No emotion. What line? Mr. Cole is reviewing his commercial relationships, following a breach of conduct. That's it. A pause. And the airline? Claire asked. Ethan's eyes tracked a cluster of suited men arguing with a gate agent, their gestures sharp, impatient. They'll call, he said. They already are. Let it ring. Inside, the pressure built. Brandon stood near the gate podium, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and urgent, pacing in tight circles like a man trying to outrun something that had already caught him. Dad, you're not listening, he said, forcing control into his tone. This guy, he shut the plane down. I don't know how, but he stopped, listened. The color drained from his face in stages. What do you mean, you know him? He said, quieter now. Around him, the environment had changed. Not loud, focused. People were watching him differently, not as a VIP, as a problem. Melissa stood a few feet away, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She hadn't moved since the officers took statements. Her mind replayed the same sequence over and over. The moment she chose a side, the moment she ignored what she heard, the moment she decided who mattered. Captain Brooks stood beside her, shoulders squared but heavy, speaking into his radio with clipped efficiency. Yes, operations has been notified. No, we don't have clearance. Correct. Insurance is still suspended. He paused, listening, his jaw tightening. I understand the cost, he said. That doesn't change the status. The cost. Everyone knew what that meant. A wide-body aircraft sitting idle, crew out of position, passengers stranded across a transatlantic route, rebooking, compensation, overtime, money burning by the minute. Brandon lowered his phone slowly. His father's voice still echoed in his ear. You picked the wrong man. He looked up. For the first time, he wasn't searching for control. He was searching for Ethan. But Ethan wasn't there anymore. Where is he? Brandon demanded, turning to the nearest agent. Where did he go? The agent didn't answer immediately. She glanced past him, toward the glass doors. Brandon followed her gaze. Outside. The black sedan. The man in the hoodie, standing still, phone at his ear, as if the entire situation behind him had already been resolved. Something inside Brandon dropped. Not anger. Not yet. Recognition. The kind that comes too late. He moved, fast, pushing through the crowd, ignoring the calls of the officers, the protests of the agent, the weight of eyes following him. The doors slid open. Cold air hit his face. "Hey!" Brandon shouted. Ethan didn't turn. "Hey!" Louder now, closer, his voice cracking at the edges. "You don't just walk away from this." Ethan ended the call, lowered the phone. Then he turned. Slowly. Brandon closed the distance, stopping just short of him, breathing harder than he wanted to admit. "You've made your point," Brandon said, forcing the words out in a steady line. "Okay? Whatever this is, fine. You win." Ethan watched him. Said nothing. Brandon swallowed. "I'll fix it," he said. "I'll call my people. We'll get the flight back online. You don't need to drag this any further." The driver stood still beside the car, eyes forward, as if none of this existed. Ethan tilted his head slightly. "Your people?" he repeated. Brandon nodded quickly. "Yes." "My father has no authority over that aircraft," Ethan said. The interruption was clean, precise. It cut the sentence in half. Brandon blinked. He has influence," he corrected, the word sounding weaker now. Ethan took a step closer. Not threatening, but final. "Influence doesn't reinstate insurance," he said. "It doesn't restore clearance. And it doesn't undo what you said." Brandon's jaw tightened. "You're taking this too far." A small pause. Ethan looked at him, and this time there was no distance left in his voice. "This is exactly as far as it goes," he said. Behind Brandon, the terminal continued to churn, voices, movement, the low roar of disruption spreading outward. In his pocket, Brandon's phone buzzed again. And again. He didn't look at it. He couldn't, because in that moment, standing on the curb, facing the man he had dismissed less than an hour ago, he finally understood something no one had taught him. Power didn't raise its voice. It didn't argue. It didn't need to prove itself. It acted. Ethan stepped past him, opened the car door, paused. "Next time," he said, without looking back. "Check the name on the manifest." Then he got in. The door closed. The car pulled away. And Brandon Hayes stood on the curb, surrounded by noise, by consequences, by a world that had shifted without asking his permission, realizing far too late that he had just tried to move the wrong man out of seat 1A. The car door closed with a soft, final sound that seemed to seal something behind it. Inside the black sedan, the noise of the terminal disappeared instantly. The chaos, the voices, the rising panic, all of it cut off like a switch had been flipped. Only the quiet hum of the engine remained, steady and controlled. Ethan leaned back against the leather seat. For the first time since the confrontation began, his shoulders lowered a fraction. Not relief. Control maintained. "Drive," he said. The car pulled away from the curb smoothly, merging into the slow flow of airport traffic. Outside, flashing lights reflected off the glass walls of the terminal. People moved in tight clusters, phones raised, voices urgent. Inside, it was still. His phone buzzed again. He didn't check it immediately. He watched the terminal recede in the tinted glass. Then he looked down. "Claire again." He answered. "Update," he said. "They're scrambling," Claire replied. Faster this time, her voice layered with the sound of multiple conversations in the background. "Aero Global's executive team is in emergency session. Legal is reviewing the lease clauses. They're trying to figure out how to reverse it. They can't, Ethan said. I know. But they're going to try. A pause. They're also preparing a statement. They want to contain the narrative before the market reacts. Ethan's gaze shifted to the skyline ahead. Glass towers, steel lines, the quiet architecture of power. They're already too late, he said. Claire didn't argue. Media requests are increasing, she continued. They want your name, your position, confirmation that you were on that flight. No interviews. What about a written statement? Not yet. Another pause. And the Hayes situation? She asked carefully. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. Proceed, he said. Claire understood. No elaboration needed. Understood, she said. We'll begin preparing the filings. He ended the call. The car moved faster now, leaving the airport perimeter, merging onto the highway. Traffic thickened, then loosened, then stretched into long, controlled lines. Ethan rested his head back for a moment, closed his eyes. Not to relax, to think. Inside the terminal, the situation had shifted again. The initial shock had turned into something sharper. Fear. Not for safety. For consequence. Captain Brooks stood near the gate, speaking into his phone with clipped urgency. Yes, I understand the financial exposure, he said, pacing slowly. But we cannot operate without clearance. This is not a delay. This is a grounding. He stopped, listened. No, he said. There is no workaround. Across from him, Melissa sat in one of the terminal chairs, hands clasped in her lap, eyes fixed on nothing. A supervisor stood in front of her, speaking in low, controlled tones. You need to walk me through exactly what happened, he said. Melissa swallowed. I tried to de-escalate, she said, her voice unsteady. Mr. Hayes was demanding the seat. He said he had priority status, he said. Did he have priority over the passenger in 1A? The supervisor cut in. She hesitated. No. Did you verify that? Another pause. Yes. And you still asked Mr. Cole to move. Her throat tightened. Yes. The supervisor exhaled slowly. Not angry. Worse. Disappointed. Did you hear any inappropriate language? He asked. Melissa's eyes flicked up, then down again. Yes. And you did nothing. It wasn't a question. She shook her head slightly. I was trying to keep the situation from escalating. It escalated, he said. Her silence answered for her. A few feet away, Brandon stood alone. Not physically. People were still around him. But the space had changed. No one stood close anymore. No one engaged. Even the officers had stepped back, their attention shifting to reports, statements, the larger situation unfolding. His phone buzzed again, and again. This time, he looked. Messages flooded in. Friends, colleagues, unknown numbers, links. He opened one. The video, different angle this time, clearer. His voice louder, more defined. You don't belong here. The words echoed through the small screen, but they didn't stay there. They existed now in every device around him, every platform, every feed. He scrolled. Comments poured in faster than he could read. Some mocking, some furious, some cold and precise. identifying, connecting, digging. He felt it happening in real time. His name, his face, his family, everything pulling into the same gravity well. No, he muttered, shaking his head, backing up a step. This wasn't how things worked. Not for him. Not ever. He opened another message. From his father. Just 2 words. Call me. He stared at it. Didn't move. Then his phone rang. He answered. Dad, what did you do? The voice on the other end was low. Controlled. Worse than shouting. It's being blown out of proportion, Brandon said quickly. It was a seating issue. Some guy, Ethan Cole, his father said. The name landed heavy. Brandon froze. You know him? He asked. A pause. Long. Tight. Do you? His father replied. Brandon didn't answer. He didn't need to. You picked a fight with the wrong man, his father said. The words were calm, but beneath them, something breaking. You don't understand, Brandon said, his voice rising despite himself. He shut down a plane. That's illegal. He can, his father cut in. Silence. And then quieter, he just did. Brandon's grip tightened around the phone. Fix it, he said. Call someone. Make it go away. Another pause. When his father spoke again, the tone had changed. Not angry, resolved. You're going to apologize, he said. Brandon blinked. What? You're going to find him, his father continued, and you're going to apologize. Publicly, privately, however he wants it. That's not happening, Brandon said immediately. It is, his father replied. Or we lose everything. The words hung there. Not dramatic, not exaggerated, just true. Brandon's chest tightened. You're overreacting, he said. But it sounded weaker now. Check the market, his father said. The line went quiet. Then click. Call ended. Brandon stood there, the noise of the terminal rushing back in around him. He opened his phone again, pulled up the market feed, and watched as the first signs of impact began to appear. The first red line appeared almost quietly. A small dip, barely noticeable, then another and another. Brandon stared at the screen, thumb hovering but not moving as the numbers updated in real time. Vane Industries, down 1%. Then 2. Then more. The graph didn't drop in a straight line. It slid, hesitated, then slipped again, like something losing its grip. Around him, the terminal noise blurred into a distant hum. He refreshed the screen. It didn't help. New alerts pushed in. Analysts, commentary, early speculation. He opened one without thinking. Executive misconduct linked to viral discrimination incident. He closed it immediately. His breathing changed, shallower, faster. This wasn't supposed to happen this way. Not this fast. Across the gate area, people were watching him openly now. Not curious, not impressed, measuring, assessing, the same way he had done to Ethan less than an hour ago. Only now, he was the one being sorted. Mr. Hayes. The voice came from behind him. He turned. One of the Port Authority officers stood there, posture relaxed but firm. We're going to need your ID for the report. Brandon blinked, momentarily thrown off. What? For the incident, the officer said. You want to make a claim, we document it. You don't, we still document it. Brandon hesitated, then reached for his wallet. His fingers weren't as steady as they used to be. He handed over the card. The officer took it, glanced at the name, then back at him. Stay available, he said, handing it back. We may need a formal statement. Brandon nodded. Didn't trust himself to speak. The officer moved away. And just like that, Brandon was no longer the center of authority. He was part of a report. Inside the car, Ethan didn't look at the market. He didn't need to. His phone buzzed again. Claire, he answered. It's moving, she said immediately. I know. The stock is reacting faster than expected. Analysts are connecting the incident to governance risk. They're flagging your position on the credit committee. Ethan's gaze stayed forward. Good. A pause. They're also pulling footage, Claire continued. More angles. The audio is clean. There's no ambiguity. Ethan said nothing. Because there didn't need to be. The airline CEO is requesting a direct call, she added. Decline. He says it's urgent. They're all urgent when they lose control. Another pause. And Hayes? Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. He'll call again, Claire said. Or his father will. Route it through legal. Understood. The call ended. The car moved through the city now. Buildings rising higher. Shadows sharper. The rhythm of Manhattan replacing the chaos of the airport. Ethan's reflection stared back at him in the tinted glass. Still calm, still unreadable. But behind it, calculation. Precision. He had already moved past the moment on the plane. Now it was about outcome. Back at the terminal, Brandon wasn't thinking that far ahead. He was still trying to stop the bleeding. He dialed another number. Fast. Urgent. Get me legal, he said the second the call connected. Now. A pause. Then a voice. Measured. Professional. This is Carter. Yeah, Brandon said, pacing again, trying to regain some of his old rhythm. I need you to shut this down. The video, the narrative, everything. This guy, Cole, he overstepped. There's got to be something we can hit him with. Silence on the other end. Not hesitation. Assessment. We're reviewing the situation, Carter said carefully. But based on what we've seen so far. Seen what? Brandon cut in. A viral clip? That doesn't mean anything legally. Actually, Carter replied, tone tightening slightly. It means quite a bit when it's corroborated by multiple witnesses, crew testimony, and the captain's report. Brandon stopped pacing. What are you saying? I'm saying, Carter continued, that from a liability standpoint, you're exposed. The word hit harder than anything else. Exposed. That's not possible, Brandon said, shaking his head. He shut down a commercial flight. That's the issue here. Not if he had contractual authority, Carter said. Another pause. He did, Brandon said, but it sounded more like a question now. Yes, Carter replied. And if the clause he invoked is valid, and it appears to be, then the airline, not him, is responsible for the operational fallout. Brandon's grip tightened around the phone. And me? He asked. A longer pause this time. When Carter spoke again, the answer was clear. You may be personally liable for damages related to the delay, he said, as well as potential claims of harassment, discrimination, and interference with a business contract. The words stacked, heavy, precise, each one closing another door. Brandon leaned against the wall, the strength draining from his legs. "That's insane," he said quietly. "It's exposure," Carter corrected. "And it's real." The call ended. Brandon lowered the phone slowly. Around him, the terminal continued to move. Flights boarding, announcements echoing. Life going on. But for him, everything had narrowed. To one point. One moment. One decision. He looked down at his screen again. The video still playing. His own voice filling the silence. "You don't belong here." He closed his eyes, and for the first time, he heard it the way everyone else did. Not confident, not justified. Ugly. Final. He opened his eyes and realized this wasn't something he could talk his way out of. Not this time. The boardroom was too quiet, not the comfortable kind, the kind that made every breath feel louder than it should. Richard Hayes sat at the head of the long glass table, hands clasped, knuckles pale, eyes fixed on the screen at the far end of the room. The footage played again. Same angle. Same moment. His son's voice. "You don't belong here." No one spoke. 4 senior executives sat along the sides. 2 lawyers, 1 communications director, all of them watching, none of them interrupting. Because there was nothing to interrupt. The damage was already done. Richard leaned back slowly. He had built Vane Industries over decades. Brick by brick. Deal by deal, not by noise, not by showmanship, by control. And right now, control was slipping. "How bad?" he asked, his voice low, steady, almost detached. The CFO cleared his throat. "Initial market reaction is negative," he said. "We're down 4% since the incident started trending. Analysts are flagging governance concerns." Richard didn't look at him. "Short term," he said. A pause. "Worst case?" The CFO hesitated. The lead counsel answered instead. "If the situation escalates," he said, "we could see contract reviews, particularly with public sector projects." Richard's eyes shifted slightly. That mattered. "Why?" he asked. The lawyer didn't sugarcoat it. "Optics," he said. "The video shows discriminatory language. If it's tied to an executive, your son, it becomes a reputational risk. Governments don't tolerate that." Silence again. Heavy. Precise. Richard nodded once. "And Cole?" he asked. The name settled into the room like a weight. The communications director spoke carefully. "He hasn't made a public statement," she said. "But his firm has confirmed he was on the flight. They're framing it as a breach of conduct." Richard exhaled slowly. "He hasn't said anything," he repeated. "No. That means he doesn't need to." The room understood. A man like Ethan Cole didn't chase headlines. He let consequences do the work. Richard stood. The movement was deliberate. Final. "Prepare a statement," he said. "Immediate. Condemn the behavior. Full accountability." The communications director nodded quickly, already taking notes. "And Brandon?" the CFO asked quietly. Richard paused. Just for a second. Then, "He's out." No hesitation. No discussion. The decision landed clean. Permanent. "Effective immediately," Richard added. "All roles, all access. The lawyer nodded. We'll draft the paperwork. Richard looked back at the screen. The video had ended, but the image remained. Frozen. A moment that couldn't be undone. "Get me Cole," he said. Inside a conference room on the 32nd floor of a glass tower overlooking the Hudson, Ethan sat alone. No assistants, no entourage, just a single folder in front of him. Closed. His phone buzzed once. Claire's name lit the screen. He answered. "They're calling," she said. "Who?" "Everyone. The airline. The bank. Hayes." Ethan didn't move. And Richard Hayes is requesting a direct conversation. A pause. He'll offer terms. Ethan looked out at the river. Grey water. Cold light. "He'll offer survival," he said. "Yes." Another pause. "Do you want to take the call?" Claire asked. Ethan considered it. Not emotionally, strategically. Then put him through. The line clicked. A new voice entered. Older. Measured. "Mr. Cole." Ethan didn't respond immediately. He let the silence stretch. Just enough. "Richard Hayes," the voice continued. "I believe we have a situation that requires resolution." Ethan leaned back slightly. "We had a situation," he said. "You're now dealing with the outcome. A breath on the other end. Controlled." "I won't defend what happened," Richard said. "My son's behavior was unacceptable." Ethan said nothing. "That said," Richard continued, "we're prepared to make this right." There it was. The offer. The pivot. Ethan's gaze shifted back to the skyline. "How?" he asked. Richard didn't hesitate. "Public apology. Immediate. Corporate action. Internal restructuring if necessary. Not bad. But not enough." Ethan's voice stayed calm. "You're describing damage control," he said, "not accountability." A pause. Longer this time. "What do you want?" Richard asked. "Direct." Finally. Ethan reached forward, opened the folder. Inside, a single document, already prepared. "You have a credit facility under review," Ethan said. 200 million. Richard didn't respond, but the shift was there. He understood where this was going. "I sit on the risk committee," Ethan continued, "and based on current exposure, I cannot recommend renewal." Silence. "Then that would collapse the company," Richard said. Ethan didn't blink. 40% of your revenue is tied to government contracts," he said. "Contracts that require compliance with conduct standards." Richard exhaled slowly. He saw it now, the full picture. "This isn't about the flight," he said quietly. Ethan's voice didn't change. It never was. Another pause. Then, "What are your terms?" Richard asked. Ethan looked down at the document, then back out at the city, his reflection in the glass. Still, controlled, unmoved. "You'll get them in writing," he said. And with that, the negotiation stopped being a conversation and became a decision. The conference room smelled like polished wood and quiet desperation. Floor-to-ceiling glass framed the Hudson River, grey and unmoving under a low winter sky. Inside, everything was sharp. Clean lines, Expensive silence. The kind of room where decisions didn't echo. They settled. Richard Hayes sat on one side of the table. He looked older than he had the day before. Not physically, structurally, like something inside him had shifted under pressure. To his right, two attorneys reviewed documents without speaking. To his left, the CFO sat rigid, hands folded too tightly, eyes flicking between the papers and the man across the table. Ethan Cole sat alone. No laptop, no legal team. Just a single folder placed precisely in front of him. Closed. He hadn't touched it yet. He didn't need to. "Mr. Cole," Richard began, voice controlled, stripped of ego. "I appreciate you taking the meeting." Ethan didn't respond immediately. He studied the man, measured him. Then, "Let's not waste time," he said. Not rude, not aggressive, just final. Richard nodded once. "Understood." "Your terms," he said. Ethan reached forward, opened the folder. Slowly, deliberately. Paper slid across glass with a soft, precise sound. Richard picked it up. His eyes moved across the first page, then the second, then back again. Each line tightening something in his face. The room stayed silent. Because everyone knew this wasn't negotiation. This was correction. Richard set the paper down. Carefully. "What you're asking," he said, choosing his words, "is severe." Ethan leaned back slightly. "It's proportional." A pause. Richard exhaled. "Let's go through it." He tapped the first section. "Loan renewal at a premium rate," he said. "Higher than market." "Yes. That alone will cost us tens of millions." Ethan didn't blink. "Then you should have priced risk better." The words landed clean. No emotion, just fact. Richard moved to the next clause. "A $10 million endowment," he read. "Civil rights scholarship. Named after you." "Not after me," Ethan corrected. "After the principle your company failed to uphold." Richard's jaw tightened slightly. But he didn't argue. Because he couldn't. He moved to the final section. And stopped. This one hit differently. "Harrison Hayes," he read slowly, "permanently barred from any executive role, board position, or decision-making authority within the company or its subsidiaries." Silence. Heavy. Final. Richard looked up. For the first time, something real showed through. Not anger. Not pride. Loss. "He's my son," he said. Ethan's voice didn't soften. "He's your liability." The room went still. Even the attorneys stopped shifting papers. Richard looked back down at the document. Read the line again, as if it might change. It didn't. "You're asking me to erase him," he said quietly. Ethan leaned forward slightly. Not aggressive, but closer. "I'm asking you to protect the 4,000 employees whose jobs depend on decisions he is not qualified to make," he said. "I'm asking you to send a message that behavior has consequences. Not statements, not apologies. Structural consequences, each word precise, measured, unavoidable." Richard closed his eyes for a brief second, then opened them. Clearer now. Not emotional. Resolved. "And if I refuse?" he asked. Ethan didn't hesitate. "I don't recommend renewal." Silence. No threats, no raised voices, just a line. Drawn. Richard leaned back. His gaze shifted to the window. The river. The city. Everything he had built. Everything at risk. He didn't look at his lawyers. He didn't ask for advice, because there was none left to give. This wasn't a legal problem anymore. It was a decision. He reached for the pen. His hand paused for just a fraction of a second. Then he signed. The sound of ink on paper was almost inaudible, but in that room, it was absolute. He set the pen down. Didn't look up. "It's done," he said. Ethan watched him. Not satisfied. Not pleased. Just complete. He closed the folder. One smooth motion. "Good," he said. Richard finally looked at him. "What happens now?" he asked. Ethan stood, adjusted his jacket. "Now," he said, "your company survives." A pause. "And my son?" Richard asked. Ethan met his gaze. Cold. Honest. "That depends on what he does next," he said. "Not cruel, not kind, just true." Ethan turned, walked toward the door. No rush, no hesitation. Behind him, the room stayed still. Because everyone understood, something irreversible had just happened. Outside, the city moved like nothing had changed. Cars flowed. People walked. Lights shifted. But inside that building, a legacy had been rewritten. And miles away, in a cheap hotel room with thin walls and flickering light, Brandon Hayes sat on the edge of a bed, staring at his phone. The same video played again. Muted this time. He didn't need the sound anymore. He knew every word, every expression, every mistake. A notification appeared. Email. From corporate. He opened it, read the first line, then the second, then stopped. Termination effective immediately. Access revoked. Further details to follow. His hand lowered slowly. The phone slipped from his fingers onto the bed. He didn't move. Didn't react. Because somewhere, deep down, he had already known. The world he lived in was gone. And for the first time in his life, there was no one left to move the consequences out of his way. 6 months later, the airport felt different. Not louder. Not quieter. Sharper. Like something invisible had shifted beneath the surface, tightening the way people moved, the way they spoke, the way they looked at one another. At Terminal 4, the polished floors reflected a different kind of order. Flight attendants stood straighter. Gate agents spoke with more certainty. The quiet hierarchy that used to bend toward money and noise now held its shape under pressure. Ethan Cole walked through the sliding glass doors without stopping. Same hoodie. Same dark denim. Same calm presence that once made people underestimate him. Only now, no one did. A concierge agent appeared at his side before he even reached the check-in line. "Mr. Cole," she said, voice steady but respectful, holding a tablet close to her chest. "We've been expecting you. Your flight is ready. Captain Brooks asked me to personally escort you to the lounge." Ethan gave a small nod. "Thank you." They moved past the line of waiting passengers. No one complained. No one questioned it. Some recognized him. Most didn't. But they felt it. That quiet authority that didn't need to announce itself. Inside the lounge, the air was warm, controlled, untouched by the noise outside. Glass walls framed the tarmac, where aircraft lined up like disciplined giants waiting for command. Ethan sat by the window. An espresso rested untouched beside him. His phone buzzed once. Claire. "Everything is stable," she said the moment he answered. The airline implemented the new conduct protocols across all routes. Complaints dropped. Staff retention is up. They're calling it the Cole Standard internally. Ethan looked out at the runway. Planes moving in slow, deliberate lines. "Good," he said. "And Hayes Industries?" she added. A brief pause. "Restructured," she continued. "They accepted all conditions. Scholarship fund is active. First group of recipients announced last week." Ethan nodded slightly. "And Brandon?" he asked. Claire hesitated. "Off the grid mostly," she said. "No corporate role, no board access. Last update puts him working for a third-party ground-handling contractor." Ethan didn't respond. He ended the call, not because he didn't care, but because the outcome had already been decided months ago. Outside, boarding began. Ethan stood, adjusted his jacket, and walked toward the gate. The jet bridge stretched ahead, narrow and cold, the same corridor where everything had started. But this time, no tension. No raised voices. Only quiet efficiency. Inside the aircraft, first class waited. Seat 1A, untouched. Perfect. A flight attendant greeted him with a composed smile. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Cole." He gave a slight nod and stepped inside. The cabin smelled faintly of citrus and polished leather. Soft light reflected off clean surfaces, everything in its place, as it should be. He placed his bag in the overhead compartment, then paused, not to sit, to look out the window. The tarmac below moved with its usual rhythm. Fuel trucks, catering lifts, baggage crews working against the cold wind. Invisible labor. Essential. His eyes settled on a figure near the cargo belt. A man in a worn jacket, reflective vest, hanging loose over his shoulders. Movements slower than the others, less practiced. Carrying weight like it meant something now. The man bent down, lifting a heavy suitcase with effort. Struggled, adjusted. Kept going. Ethan watched. Not long. Just enough. The man looked up. For a brief moment, their eyes met through the thick glass. Recognition hit instantly. Brandon Hayes. The arrogance was gone. Stripped, replaced by something quieter, something heavier. Reality. Brandon froze for half a second, then looked away. Pulled his beanie lower, turned back to the work. No words. None needed. Ethan didn't move, didn't react. He simply took in the moment. Not with satisfaction, not with cruelty, with clarity. This wasn't revenge. It was consequence. Pure. Unavoidable. A system correcting itself, one decision at a time. "Everything all right, sir?" the flight attendant asked gently. Ethan turned back. "Yes," he said. He sat down, pressed the button. The seat reclined smoothly beneath him. A glass of champagne appeared at his side. Bubbles rising. Silent. Controlled. Outside, the engines began to hum. Low at first, then building. The aircraft pushed back from the gate, massive and precise, leaving the terminal behind. Ethan didn't look out the window again. He didn't need to. He already knew what was down there, what had changed, and what hadn't. He picked up his book, the same one. Dog-eared page, waiting. He turned it, took a sip. The cabin settled into that rare, suspended silence that only exists before takeoff. Not empty, full. Full of everything that had happened, everything that had been decided, everything that would never happen the same way again. Because somewhere between entitlement and consequence, a line had been drawn. And this time, it held. The plane accelerated down the runway, lifted, clean, effortless, breaking away from the ground and everything tied to it. Ethan read. Calm, unbothered, exactly where he belonged. And somewhere far below, on cold concrete and moving belts, a man who once demanded the world now carried its weight one bag at a time. The sky swallowed the aircraft. The city shrank. And for the first time since that moment in Seat 1A, everything was quiet. If this story stayed with you, make sure to like, subscribe, and drop 3 words in the comments. Real world justice.